Hi, it's Hello Fog here. I'm out walking safe with the dog again. And we're on our way to the beach. Once we get there, I want to tell you about the next episode in my little series about building my home studio of sorts. Well, here we are. This next episode is about the desk. I bought the desk as a flat pack from Thomann, and I thought I'd do a little review about how easy it went together and what it's like when it's finished.
First off, I want to emphasise that this is not a sponsored video. I bought this desk with my own money, and what follows is my genuine unbiased opinion. You also need to be aware that I'm no DIYer, and I really dislike flat packs. You're looking at a man who's never even set foot in an IKEA. Not only am I not a DIYer, I'm also pretty cack-handed when it comes to practical things, so it's likely that if I can build this desk, most able-bodied people will be able to do so too.
The desk I'm talking about is Thomann's Millennium SD-120 StudioDesk. I ordered it online from the Thomann website, which was pretty straightforward. I got it mainly because it has a keyboard drawer large enough for my 49-key MIDI keyboard, and because of its keen price and favourable reviews. It also has a shelf over a pair of 19-inch 5U racks, neither of which I particularly wanted. But this desk was less expensive than others with similar keyboard drawers that didn't have the shelf.
It took just under 2 weeks for delivery from Germany to Wales. Now, I intentionally bought this desk before the UK left the EU, so if you're ordering one now, I don't know if that's had any impact on the process. But I did encounter a few problems. There was a minor glitch with the order that put it on hold till I provided some extra information. The trouble is, I didn't get any confirmation that the info had been received, and it took 2 or 3 days for the website to show that my order was finally being processed. Tracking information only worked after the desk arrived in the UK, so I was left up in the air as to when it would arrive, and then the UPS managed to deliver the day before they said they would. Good job we were in, really. All in all, the process was pretty frustrating. Some of that's down to Thomann, and some of it's down to UPS. But we got there in the end. So was it worth the wait? Let's find out.
Okay, the desk has finally arrived, and it's time to have a look at what was in the box. Everything was pretty well packed and arrived undamaged and complete, except that there was a very minor ding on the main desktop. Luckily, that's pretty well hidden, and certainly not bad enough to be worth the hassle of returning the desk to Germany.
Every component has a sticker with an identifying number, which makes following the directions relatively straightforward. I was impressed that all the different types of screws and fittings came within their own bubble within this packaging, and all were identified by a letter. That included an Allen key or hex wrench, or whatever you call this thing in your part of the world. All very organised and an encouraging start.
Talking of tools, in addition to the Allen key, you'll also need a crosshead or Phillips screwdriver.
I struggled to attach some of the larger parts of the desk using the Allen key, so I resorted to a powered screwdriver with a suitable hexagonal bit for those parts. If you've got arthritis in your wrist like I have, you might need to do the same. An extension rod for the screwdriver came in handy for some of the harder to reach screws, and at times a flexible shaft was useful.
As is often the case these days, the instructions are pictorial with no text. I suspect this is done to save costs rather than for the benefit of the customer. Personally, I don't learn too well visually and prefer some text. Having said that, these were pretty good, and I didn't have too many problems with them.
Okay, it's time to get on with the build. Because of my general incompetence when it comes to DIY, I took this very slowly and deliberately. I still made some mistakes, but I got there in the end. The end being 3 hours from the start, including filming, that is. But that's me. I did see someone on YouTube who said they did it in an hour and a half. One even claimed 30 minutes. Yeah, right. I mainly built this single-handed, which is okay for most of the build, but a helper would have made things easier in a few places. Well, now I need to confess something. When I was building the desk, I wasn't paying too much attention to the video I was shooting. It was very much an afterthought. So I apologise in advance for the picture quality. It was all done with a handheld smartphone, but I hope it's good enough to illustrate the main stages of the build. Right, let's get on with it.
The first part is simple. Just attach the metal crosspiece to the right and left leg components, 2 screws and you're done. Next, you need to attach the large metal component that braces the legs. I took some time to make sure I got it on the correct side of the legs and the right way up, because I found it hard to translate the orientation on the diagram to the actual frame. As I said, I don't think too well pictorially, so others might not struggle with this like I did. Once I'd got the orientation sorted out, the part went on quite easily. It would have been easier still with a helper. It's important to make sure the screws, bolts, whatever, are tightened really well, because the desk gets most of its rigidity from this component. My desk started rocking from side to side after a couple of weeks. I found that these screws had worked loose. Retightening fixed the problem. Fitting the desktop was quite straightforward, except that the locations of a couple of the screws were a bit difficult to reach. It was at this point that I dusted off the electric screwdriver, because I found it hard going with the Allen key. The desktop is the other component that gives the desk its rigidity, so those screws need to be well tightened too. Next to be fitted are 3 black wooden components. They have a dual purpose. They act as risers for the shelf and as sides for the 2 5U racks. I found these parts the most confusing to fit, and it's the stage where the instruction sheet was the least helpful. I couldn't come up with an arrangement that matched the illustration exactly. What you need to do is make sure the vertical line of pre-drilled holes are towards the front of the desk, where the rack mounts are to be attached later. The large half-depth holes need to be at the top. They're used for the clasps that retain the shelf. You need to get the large holes on the 2 end risers to face inwards. It turns out that it doesn't matter which side the hole on the middle riser faces. This was the part that I couldn't get to match the illustration. Once I got the placing and orientation sussed, the risers screwed to the desktop quite easily, although once again some of the screw holes were inconveniently located. I used the electric screwdriver again, with an extension shaft this time. Fitting the shelf was straightforward compared to fitting the risers. First off, you need to screw the metal fasteners into the holes in the bottom of the shelf. I just tightened them finger tight. Then the shelf needs to be lowered onto the risers, and the protruding fasteners have to be located in the pre-drilled holes on the tops of the risers. It was a bit fiddly getting all 6 fasteners lined up with the holes, but it was a lot easier than I expected. Finally, the circular metal retaining clips are inserted into the appropriate holes in the risers. They all went in very easily and just needed a crosshead screwdriver to tighten them. The next step is to fit the mounting bars for the rack. These bars are handed. There are 2 left and 2 right-handed bars. Helpfully, they're stamped L and R respectively. Providing you took the time earlier to get the shelf risers oriented properly, the process of fitting these bars is really straightforward. There are just 2 crosshead screws per bar. If you've got 3 hands, the next step is easy. For the rest of us, fitting the drawer sliders is a little fiddly. I think this step was the source of most of the strong language I used during this build. Luckily, I stripped the sound from the video clips. You need to attach the hangers to the underside of the desktop. I didn't want to risk damaging anything by turning the desk onto its back, so I fitted these from underneath. I found offering up a component while locating the correct pre-drilled hole and finger tightening the screw quite tricky, especially as the drawer slider had a habit of sliding out. With hindsight, I should have taped the drawer sliders closed before attempting this stage. After the hassle with the sliders, fitting the keyboard drawer to them was a complete doddle. The sliders have lugs and you simply lowered the drawer onto them. From beneath, it's just a matter of joggling the drawer until the screw holes line up with the lugs and then fixing them with 2 crosshead screws per side. Easy, even for me. This desk has 2 useful hooks, one on either end. They're designed for headphones, but I reckon you could hang a cable or 2 instead. At first sight, they look easy to fit, but the screw holes are in line with the hook, so it's hard to get a screwdriver in at the correct angle. After I went and fetched a flexible shaft, things were much easier. Finally, numerous screws and washers are provided to fix rack-mounted gear into the 2 19-inch 5U racks. I don't have any such equipment, so I skip this phase and simply stash the screws away in case I need them in the future. And that's it. It's all done. So, what's the desk like to use? In general, I'm very pleased with it.
Once I've got the screws in the stiffening panel sufficiently tight, the desk is very stable, even with my gear installed and with heavy speakers up on the shelf. The keyboard drawer runs smoothly, and it's a decent size compared with some. It easily accommodates my 49-key keyboard with room to spare. The only little problem, which will be common to all desks with keyboard drawers, is that you have to sit quite low to get your legs under the drawer. That's not such a problem with an adjustable height chair though. The shelf is pretty useful for holding other bits of gear. I have an old cassette deck up there. But it's a bit too high for speakers, I've found. Mine are up there at the moment, but I'll probably move them. Others have commented that the shelf's also a bit tall for monitor screens too, but I've not tested that. I can see why it's so high. The rack would have had to be less than 5U tall otherwise. It's a compromise, I guess. Speaking of which, I can't comment on how well the rack mounts are aligned because I've no suitable gear with which to test them. I'm just popping back from the future to say that I've been using the desk for a few weeks now, and I'm thinking of making some changes to it. I did say that the speakers were too high on the shelf, and I was thinking of moving them. Well, in this tiny room, I can't find anywhere to move them to. So I'm thinking of removing the shelf entirely and dropping the speakers down onto desk stands. Now, I've not decided finally, but if I do that, I'll come back and make an update video. Now, back to the past. Back to the past. Back to the past. Summing up then, there were a few glitches in the ordering and delivery process, which was disappointing. But the desk was delivered well packed and in good condition. The instructions were better than I expected. The build presented me with a few small problems, but I managed to overcome them, and given how impractical I am, that actually surprised me. And at the price I paid, it was extremely good value for money, and at the end of 2020 at least, was significantly cheaper than other similar desks I could find. Would I recommend it? Well, it's good quality, relatively easy to build, extremely good value for money, so yeah, I do recommend it, wholeheartedly.
Well, that about wraps things up. In the next episode, I'll give you a tour of my audio equipment, most of which now lives on the desk.
That's it for this episode then. Thanks for watching. Ta-ra!